In a bright and busy laboratory, deep within the heart of an alien space station, a group of alien scientists were gathered. Their eyes shone with excitement as they argued over a topic that had been discussed for hours. The room was filled with the hum of machines, the beeping of devices, and the sound of alien voices debating passionately. These were the galaxy's most brilliant minds, and today they were discussing something strange. Humans. Dr. Zarnak, the leader of the group, was the most vocal. His alien skin glowed a faint green as he spoke. He had spent years studying other species, learning about their strengths and weaknesses. Humans are weak, he said, his voice calm but full of certainty. They cannot survive the toughest environments. Their bodies are frail, and their minds are slow to adapt. I have studied them, and I am sure no human can survive the planet with acid rain. The other aliens nodded in agreement, murmuring among themselves. The planet Dr. Zarnak was talking about was known as Zoreth, a place where the acid rain fell relentlessly, burning anything in its path. The air was toxic, and the ground was made of sharp, jagged rocks that could tear through anything that wasn't carefully protected. It was a planet where only the toughest species could survive. Dr. Zarnak smiled as he looked around the room at the other scientists. He was sure that no one would disagree with him. Humans are simply not made for such harsh conditions. They are too fragile, too soft. An alien named Thalix, a scientist known for being a little more open-minded, raised his hand. His sharp eyes gleamed, but his voice was calm. But, Dr. Zarnak, have you ever seen a human face such an environment? Have we tested them ourselves? The others fell silent. This was a question they had never asked. They had read reports, of course, and heard stories from across the galaxy, but they had never seen a human try to survive in such an extreme place. Dr. Zarnak's expression darkened slightly. It doesn't matter. We know enough about their limitations. No human would be able to last more than a few minutes in that kind of storm. Thalix didn't back down. I don't think we should be so sure. What if there's more to humans than we realize? Dr. Zarnak laughed. You're wasting your time. You think that humans could survive on Zoreth. I'll make a bet with you. If a human can survive on that planet, I'll admit that humans are stronger than I thought. But if they fail, and they will, I'll never hear any more of these ridiculous ideas about their abilities. Thalix's eyes widened. He could see that Dr. Zarnak wasn't just making a statement. He was issuing a challenge. The other aliens looked curious, waiting to see what would happen next. Fine, Thalix said, his voice steady. I'll take that bet. But we need a human to test this theory. The room went silent again. The other scientists exchanged nervous glances. The challenge was set, but finding a human willing to face the storm on Zoreth wasn't going to be easy. Humans weren't known for being reckless, and no one would willingly choose to face death in such a dangerous place. But then, someone spoke up. I'll do it. The voice came from the doorway, and all eyes turned to see a young human standing there. Her name was Lieutenant Alex Grant, a member of the Galactic Exploration Team. She was known for her courage and quick thinking in the most dangerous situations. She had faced many life-threatening challenges before, but this one was different. Zoreth's acid rain was unlike anything she had ever faced. Dr. Zarnak blinked in surprise. You're willing to go to Zoreth? Alex nodded. I've survived worse. I can handle it. The other scientists exchanged shocked looks. A human had just volunteered to take on a planet known for its deadly weather. They had never expected this. Dr. Zarnak felt a knot form in his stomach, but he quickly hid it behind a smile. Very well, he said. You'll go to Zoreth, and we'll see if you can survive. But don't say I didn't warn you. This planet is deadly. Alex didn't hesitate. I'll survive, she said simply. And so the bet was set. Dr. Zarnak, confident in his belief that no human could survive the acid rain planet, prepared to send Alex to Zoreth. The scientists gathered around their monitors, eager to watch the test unfold. They were certain Alex would fail. After all, who could survive such a brutal environment? But Alex, calm and focused, was already preparing herself for the challenge. She knew the odds were stacked against her, but she wasn't afraid. In her mind, there was only one thought: I'm going to prove them wrong. The air inside the alien lab was thick with tension. The scientists were still buzzing with excitement after the challenge had been set. Dr. Zarnak had issued the bet, and now it was time to see if a human could survive the deadly acid rain on Zoreth. Most of the aliens were sure that no human could last longer than a few minutes on that planet. It seemed impossible. But then, something unexpected happened. From the far corner of the room, a voice broke through the chatter. "I'll do it." Everyone turned. A human woman stood at the doorway, her eyes calm and steady, though her presence sent a shockwave through the group. She was tall, with short, dark hair, and a posture that suggested she was always ready for a challenge. This was Lieutenant Alex Grant, a member of the Galactic Exploration Team, a group known for sending brave individuals into the most dangerous situations across the galaxy. Alex was no stranger to danger. She had faced countless life-threatening situations during her time as an explorer, from hostile alien planets to shipwrecks in deep space. But Zoreth was different. Its acid rain was a killer. The planet's weather was harsh, toxic, and deadly. No one had ever survived it without proper shelter, equipment, and support. And yet, here was Alex, volunteering to go into the heart of it all, with nothing but her wits and her will to survive. The alien scientists exchanged glances, unsure of what to make of this human's confidence. Felix, the more open-minded scientist who had accepted Dr. Zarnak's challenge, raised an eyebrow. "You're willing to face Zoreth's acid rain?" he asked, his voice filled with curiosity. "You know how dangerous it is, don't you?" Alex nodded without hesitation. "I faced tough environments before," she replied calmly. "This won't be any different." Dr. Zarnak chuckled, his voice dripping with doubt. "You think you can survive Zoreth's storms? I told you, no human can last more than a few minutes in that kind of rain. Even the toughest species would struggle." Alex's gaze never wavered. "I'm not the toughest species, but I'll prove that I can handle it. You'll see." The room fell silent. The aliens didn't know whether to laugh or be impressed. They had never expected a human to volunteer for such a challenge. Most of them assumed that humans were weak, slow to adapt, and ill-suited for such harsh conditions. But Alex's calm confidence told a different story. Dr. Zarnak, still unconvinced, waved his hand dismissively. "Fine, if you're so eager to prove your point, then go ahead. But don't say I didn't warn you." Alex gave him a small, knowing smile. "I won't need a warning. I'm ready." And just like that, the bet was set. The human would go to Zoreth. The alien scientists quickly prepared the necessary equipment, communication devices, a basic suit to protect her from the acidic rain, and a small ship to transport her to the planet's surface. The aliens were eager to watch. They were sure the challenge would be over in minutes. Alex, on the other hand, felt a rush of excitement building inside her. She didn't feel afraid. She felt ready. She had spent years training for tough environments, learning survival techniques that many considered impossible. But this was different. Zoreth's acid rain was unlike anything she had ever encountered. The thought of facing it didn't scare her, but it did make her focus even harder. As she suited up, the other aliens gathered around their control panels, their eyes glued to the screens. Felix was the only one who looked more thoughtful than excited. "I wonder," he muttered to himself, "can a human really survive such a storm?" The shuttle was ready, and the countdown began. Alex boarded the ship, her movements smooth and confident. She strapped herself in, preparing for the journey. The ship lifted off with a soft hum, and soon she was speeding toward the deadly planet below. As the ship descended, Alex looked out the window. Zoreth was a stormy, dark world with thick clouds swirling above. The surface below looked dangerous and inhospitable, but Alex was determined. She had trained for moments like this, moments when everything seemed impossible, but she refused to give up. The ship landed with a soft thud. The door opened, and Alex stepped out, feeling the acid rain hit her suit. The droplets sizzled as they made contact with the fabric, but the suit protected her. For now, she glanced around, taking in the jagged landscape and the dark sky overhead. This was the test. The communication device in her ear buzzed to life. "Alex, can you hear us?" Felix's voice came through clearly. "I hear you loud and clear," Alex replied, her voice steady. "I'm ready to begin." The aliens on the other side of the communication system waited anxiously. Alex didn't know what would happen next, but she did know one thing. She was about to prove them all wrong. The moment Alex stepped onto the surface of Zoreth, she could feel the difference. The air was thick and heavy, almost suffocating. It wasn't like the breathable air of other planets. Zoreth's atmosphere was filled with toxic gases, the kind that could kill most species in minutes. The sky was dark, covered with thick, swirling clouds. There was no sun, just an endless gray that made everything look eerie and lifeless. The acid rain began to fall as soon as her boots touched the ground. At first, the drops were small, almost like a light drizzle, but she knew better than to be fooled by their quiet start. The rain quickly grew heavier, the droplets hissing and sizzling as they hit the ground. The air smelled sharp, like burning metal, and it stung her skin even through the protection of her suit. Alex's suit was made of a special material, designed to shield her from the worst of the rain. It had a tough outer layer that could resist the acid, but even that couldn't protect her from everything. She knew she didn't have much time before the rain would start to wear down the suit. The acid in the rain wasn't just burning, it was corrosive, capable of breaking down anything over time. She pulled the hood of her suit tighter, trying to block out the sting of the acid. Her heart beat faster. This was it. The challenge had begun. From the shuttle, the alien scientists were watching intently, their eyes fixed on the screens. They could see Alex on the surface, a tiny figure in the distance, standing alone on a planet that was trying to kill her. Dr. Zarnak smiled to himself. He had no doubt that she would fail. After all, this planet had killed many species before. Humans were no different. "Let's see how long she lasts," Zarnak muttered to Felix, who was standing next to him. Felix didn't respond immediately. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the screen. He wasn't sure why, but something about this human intrigued him. She was calm, almost too calm for someone standing in the middle of a storm that could kill her. He wondered, could she really survive? Meanwhile, Alex was moving quickly, scanning her surroundings. There was no time to waste. The acid rain was falling faster now, the drops hitting the ground with a loud hiss. She couldn't just stand there. She had to find shelter, and fast. Her boots crunched on the sharp, jagged rocks beneath her feet. The landscape was barren, almost lifeless, with nothing but craters and boulders scattered across the ground. She spotted a rock formation in the distance, a large outcrop that might offer some protection from the rain. It was her best chance. Alex didn't hesitate. She moved toward the formation as quickly as she could, her suit's sensors working to monitor her vitals and the suit's integrity. The acid rain continued to pour down, making the ground slippery and dangerous. With every step, she had to be careful not to slip. The rain wasn't just harmful, it was also making the ground more unstable. As she approached the rock formation, she noticed something alarming. The acid was starting to eat away at the surface of the rocks. The rain was so powerful that even the solid stone was being eroded. There was no way she could hide under the rocks for long. If the rain continued, even that shelter would disappear. "Think, Alex. Think fast," she muttered to herself. She looked around, her mind racing. There had to be something she could use to protect herself. Then she spotted it. A large metal object, half buried in the ground. It looked like part of a crashed ship, perhaps an old piece of wreckage from an expedition that had failed long ago. Alex rushed over, her heart pounding. The metal was still strong, and it seemed to be mostly intact despite the years of acid rain. Without wasting a second, Alex began to dig around the wreckage. She used the tools built into her suit to pry away the dirt and rocks. Her hands were steady, even as the rain pounded down harder. The shipwreck could be the key to surviving this storm. The metal would protect her from the acid rain for longer than anything else. It didn't take long for her to uncover the wreckage. Alex quickly dragged a large metal sheet out of the ground. She could already feel the heat from the acid as it started to eat away at the dirt around her. She needed to move faster. The alien scientists watched in silence. They were amazed to see Alex's quick thinking. "She's resourceful," Felix said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. Dr. Zarnak didn't answer. He was still convinced Alex wouldn't last much longer. With the metal sheet in hand, Alex worked quickly to create a small shelter. She leaned the metal against a rock, creating a makeshift shield that would keep her mostly safe from the acid rain. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give her a moment of respite. The rain continued to fall in heavy sheets, but the shelter held up for now. Alex's breath came out in slow, steady gasps. She had done it. She had found shelter. The acid rain was still falling, but she was safe for now. The alien scientists, watching from their ship, stared at the screens in disbelief. Dr. Zarnak's confidence was starting to falter. He couldn't understand how this human had done it. She had only been on the planet for a few minutes, but she had already proven him wrong. The storm on Zoreth raged on, the acid rain falling in sheets that seemed endless. The metal sheet Alex had found gave her some protection, but she knew it wouldn't last long. The acid was relentless, eating away at the ground and anything it touched. She could feel the temperature inside her suit rising as the rain burned away at the ground around her. It wasn't just the rain she had to worry about. It was the environment itself, trying to kill her with every drop. She could hear the rain hitting the metal sheet with a sharp hiss, but it was muffled. Her breath came in steady, calm rhythms, even though her heart was racing. This was what she had trained for. The conditions on Zoreth were brutal, but she had been in worse. She knew how to stay focused. But that didn't mean this was easy. Alex's mind was already working fast. She was running out of time. The metal sheet would eventually weaken under the constant acid attack. She couldn't stay here forever. She needed to act fast. Her eyes scanned the area. There had to be more she could do. She didn't have the luxury of time. If she stayed in this small shelter, the acid rain would break down the metal, and she'd be exposed. But if she moved too far, she risked getting caught in the full force of the storm. The rain was acidic and dangerous. It could melt through her suit in minutes if she wasn't careful. Then, Alex remembered something. The communication device in her ear buzzed softly, bringing her back to the present. "Alex, do you read us?" Felix's voice crackled through the static. "I hear you loud and clear," Alex responded, trying to keep her voice calm. She didn't want them to hear the slight edge of worry creeping in. "I'm in a shelter, but I can't stay here. The rain is breaking it down." There was a pause, and then Felix spoke again, his voice sounding concerned. "We're analyzing the rain's effects. We don't have much data on how long the metal can withstand it. We suggest you—" Alex cut him off. "I don't have time to wait for your analysis. I need a plan." She could hear Felix hesitate, but then he said, "Okay, there's a ridge not far from you. It may give you a higher vantage point, and there's a chance the rain is less severe there. If you move quickly, you might make it." Alex didn't waste another second. She knew she had to keep moving. The acid rain had already weakened her shelter, and staying in one place for too long would only put her in danger. She looked around at the rocky terrain and then back at the ridge Felix had mentioned. It wasn't too far, but the journey was still treacherous. She took a deep breath, her eyes narrowing in focus. The rain was coming down in waves, but she could see a gap in the clouds ahead, a small path that might lead her to higher ground. With a quick glance at her suit's status, she started to move. Each step she took was carefully calculated. The ground was uneven, and the jagged rocks underfoot made it difficult to move quickly. The rain pounded harder as she moved forward, but her suit kept most of the acid from reaching her skin. Even so, she could feel the heat inside the suit as it worked to protect her. The constant pressure on the suit's systems was draining her energy. Alex didn't let it slow her down. She pressed forward, her eyes scanning the rocky terrain ahead. The ridge was still a distance away, but it seemed like the only chance she had. Every step felt like a battle, but Alex was determined. She wouldn't stop. She couldn't. She reached the ridge just as the rain began to intensify again. The wind picked up, pushing her back, but Alex pushed through it. She had to get to the top. As she climbed higher, she felt the pressure in her chest ease. The air was thinner up here, and the acid rain wasn't as fierce. The rocks provided some shelter, but she wasn't out of danger yet. Finally, she made it to the top. She dropped to her knees, gasping for breath, but there was no time to rest. She glanced around, taking in her new surroundings. The rain was lighter here, but she knew it wouldn't stay that way. She could hear the storm growing stronger in the distance. Alex activated her suit's sensors, checking her vitals and the status of her equipment. Everything was holding up, but just barely. The acid rain was wearing her down. She needed to find a way to escape the storm, or it would eventually break her suit down. She could hear Thalex's voice in her ear again. "Alex, you've made it to higher ground. Good job, but the storm is getting worse. You need to find shelter again. There's a cave system nearby. It's not ideal, but it's your best option." Alex didn't need to hear more. She was already moving. The ridge had given her some protection, but the storm was still too dangerous to stay exposed. She made her way toward the cave system Felix had mentioned, her mind working quickly. She couldn't stop now. The acid rain had already shown its power. This wasn't the time to slow down. As she ran toward the cave entrance, Alex's thoughts were clear. Survival. The planet wanted her gone, but she wasn't ready to give up just yet. She could outsmart the storm. She could beat it. She just had to think fast. Alex's heart raced as she moved toward the cave system Felix had mentioned. Her suit's internal systems were humming, working overtime to keep her alive in the brutal acid storm. The rain had not let up, and the toxic drops were relentless, hammering at her from all directions. But now, there was hope. The cave, dark and hidden among the jagged rocks, was her refuge. As she neared the cave entrance, she felt a wave of relief. The rain seemed to lessen the closer she got. The rocks and cliffs around the entrance offered a natural barrier from the worst of the storm. She wasted no time. The moment she reached the mouth of the cave, she ducked inside, feeling the rain lessen, and the wind die down. She stood for a moment, allowing herself to catch her breath. The cave was cold and damp, but it was dry. For the first time since she had set foot on Zorith, she felt like she could finally breathe easy. Her suit was still holding strong against the rain, but the storm outside was fierce. If she had stayed out there much longer, the acid would have eaten through her protective layers. Alex pulled off her helmet, running a hand through her damp hair. Her face felt like it had been stung by 1,000 tiny needles from the acid rain. She could feel the sting, even though the suit had protected her skin. The cave was quiet now, the only sound the occasional drip of water from the ceiling as the rain continued to pour outside. She took a moment to assess her situation. The cave was narrow and dark, but it seemed like it could be a safe spot for now. She activated the small light on her suit, illuminating the path ahead. The walls of the cave were rough and uneven, jagged rock formations that looked ancient and weathered. It wasn't much, but it was enough. She could rest here for a while, but she knew she couldn't stay long. Alex moved deeper into the cave, looking for a better spot to settle. She found a small alcove in the rock, large enough for her to sit down and catch her breath. She checked the status of her suit again, Her energy reserves were running low, and the acid rain had already taken a toll on her equipment. The constant bombardment was wearing her down, but she wasn't ready to give up. The communication device in her ear buzzed again. "Alex, you've made it to the cave." Felix's voice came through, sounding relieved. "How are you holding up?" "I'm in," Alex said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion she felt. "The storm is still intense, but I got some shelter. For now, I'm okay." "That's good to hear," Felix replied. "The rain outside is getting worse. We're monitoring it, but the storm seems to be moving in from the north. You'll need to stay inside for a while." Alex nodded, even though Felix couldn't see her. She looked around the cave once more. The walls were uneven, but the space seemed solid enough. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than being out in the storm. She decided to set up camp here for the time being. She took off her backpack, pulling out the emergency supplies she had packed. There wasn't much, just the basics: water, food rations, and some medical supplies. She quickly drank some water, the cold liquid feeling like a relief after the heat of her suit. The food rations would help her regain some energy, but she had to be careful. There wasn't a lot, and she didn't know how long she would be stuck on this planet. She sat down on the rocky floor, leaning against the wall of the cave. The shelter was small, but it was enough for now. She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to rest. She knew she couldn't sleep for long, but just a few minutes of peace was enough to recharge her mind. As she sat in silence, she thought about the challenge. The alien scientists watching from their ship had underestimated her, but Alex had already shown them that she was capable of surviving in ways they hadn't considered. The storm had thrown everything at her, but she had fought back. And now, in the shelter of this cave, she was safe. But that safety was only temporary. The storm outside was still raging, and she knew it wouldn't be long before she would need to move again. She couldn't afford to wait here too long. The acid rain would eventually find its way into the cave, just as it had eaten away at the rocks outside. Alex needed to think fast. Suddenly, a sharp sound echoed through the cave. Alex tensed, her hand automatically reaching for the small knife at her belt. She listened carefully. It wasn't the storm. It was something else. The sound came again, faint but clear. Footsteps. Her mind raced as she stood up quickly. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, her eyes scanning the shadows of the cave. Was she alone? Or was something, or someone, else out there? The footsteps grew louder. Alex held her breath, waiting. The sound was close now. She was not alone. The footsteps echoed louder in the cave, sending a chill through Alex's spine. She instinctively crouched low, her body moving quietly into the shadows. Her heart pounded, and she gripped her knife tightly. The footsteps weren't random. They were purposeful, coming closer. Whoever or whatever it was, they were making their way directly toward her. Alex held her breath, trying to steady her pulse. She needed to stay calm. She couldn't afford to panic now, not after everything she had already survived. She quickly ran through her options. She could hide and wait, hoping the intruder wouldn't find her. But that was a gamble. She could try to confront them, but she didn't know what she was dealing with yet. The footsteps came to an abrupt stop just a few feet away. Alex's hand hovered over her knife. The cave's silence stretched on, broken only by the occasional drip of water from the ceiling. She waited, still as stone, her mind racing. Who was out there? Another human, or something else? Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. "You're a brave one, aren't you?" The voice was calm, almost amused. It sounded alien, but not in a way that felt threatening. There was something familiar about it, like it belonged to someone who had seen a lot and knew how to survive. Alex froze. She didn't answer right away. She needed more information. The voice was foreign, but the words seemed almost casual, as if the speaker wasn't worried at all about being caught in the middle of an acid rainstorm on a deadly planet. This person, or being, was either extremely confident or extremely foolish. "Don't worry," the voice continued. "I won't bite. I just figured a human would be the last thing I'd find here." Alex slowly stood up, but she kept her knife close. She stepped out from the shadows, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the figure that had appeared in the entrance of the cave. A tall, slender alien stood in front of her. Its skin was smooth and gray, almost translucent in the dim light. Its eyes were large and black, watching her intently. Alex's first thought was that it looked nothing like what she had expected. She had read about various alien species, but this one was different. Its presence wasn't frightening, yet there was a sense of power that made her cautious. "I'm not looking for trouble," the alien said, holding up its hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm just passing through." Alex's grip on her knife loosened slightly, but she didn't lower it. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady. "I'm called Jakar. I come from a nearby settlement. We've been tracking the storm and saw your ship land. Thought I'd check on the new arrivals." "New arrivals?" Alex's eyebrows furrowed. "How long have you been on this planet?" "Long enough to know it's not a place for the faint-hearted," Jakar replied, his voice laced with a hint of amusement. "Zoreth teaches you lessons. Fast." Alex studied him, the tension in her muscles starting to fade. She had no reason to trust this alien yet, but she also knew she didn't have many options. The storm was still fierce outside, and she wasn't about to venture out alone. For the moment, he was her only chance at surviving. "You're right about that," she said, her voice more relaxed now. "Zoreth doesn't give second chances." Jakar chuckled softly. "That's the lesson we all learn here. If you don't think fast, the planet will have you for lunch. But you—" He eyed her with a mix of admiration and curiosity. "You seem different. Not many can survive this long in the acid rain." "I didn't come here to die," Alex replied firmly. "And I'm not leaving until I prove I can survive anything this planet throws at me." The alien nodded, a knowing look in his eyes. "Good. You've got the right attitude. But you also have to understand something. Survival isn't just about fighting the planet. It's about learning from it. You can't just survive through force. You have to adapt. Zoreth will show you that in ways you never expected." Alex tilted her head. "Adapt." Jakar stepped closer, his gaze intense. "Yes, the storm, the acid rain, it's all a test. It's not about outsmarting the planet or overpowering it. It's about working with it, understanding it. Most who come here don't make it because they try to fight it directly. The ones who survive are the ones who know when to move, when to hide, and when to wait." Alex listened carefully, his words sinking in. She had been focusing on outlasting the storm, but maybe there was more to survival on Zoreth than she had realized. It wasn't just about battling the elements. It was about finding a way to live with them, to use them to her advantage. "I've been trying to fight it, haven't I?" she said, more to herself than to Jakar. "You've been doing well," he said with a slight grin. "But surviving here means more than just endurance. It's about balance. Once you understand that, Zoreth will stop trying to kill you." Alex's mind raced as the full weight of Jakar's words hit her. This wasn't a battle she could win with strength alone. She would have to learn how to bend, how to survive by the planet's rules, not her own. "I get it," she said, finally letting her knife drop to her side. "Survival isn't about fighting back. It's about understanding and adapting." Jakar's smile widened. "Exactly. You're starting to get it." As the two of them stood there in the cave, the storm outside still raged, but Alex felt a new sense of clarity. The lesson had been hard-earned, but it was one she would carry with her. Zoreth was a planet that wouldn't be conquered. It had to be understood. And now, Alex was ready to learn. The days on Zoreth had become a test of patience and adaptability for Alex. After meeting Jakar, she learned to change her approach to survival. The acid rain still hammered the planet daily, but she no longer saw it as an enemy. Instead, she observed it, studied it, and adjusted her actions accordingly. Jikar's lessons had been invaluable, and Alex had begun to understand that survival on this planet was not about brute force. It was about balance. The storm outside the cave had been raging for hours, but inside, it was calm. Alex had settled into a routine, and she and Jikar had begun to talk more. He was full of stories about Zoreth, about the strange creatures that roamed the planet, and about the people who lived in the small settlements scattered across the land. Jikar's easygoing nature made him a good companion, and Alex found herself starting to trust him. One morning, as the storm began to ease, Jikar stood up suddenly, his eyes narrowing. Alex looked up from her food ration and followed his gaze. "What is it?" she asked, instinctively reaching for her knife. "There's something out there," Jikar said, his voice low but urgent. "Something big." Alex's heart skipped a beat. She glanced toward the cave entrance, her senses on alert. She had learned to be cautious on Zoreth, and Jikar's warning wasn't one to ignore. Without waiting for a response, Jikar moved swiftly to the entrance of the cave. Alex followed close behind, her instincts telling her to stay sharp. She stepped into the open, her eyes squinting against the fading sunlight. The storm had cleared somewhat, leaving the air thick and heavy with moisture. The landscape around them was wild and untamed, a jagged mix of cliffs, rock formations, and strange plant life. Jikar raised his hand, signaling for Alex to stop. He pointed to the distance, where something massive was moving through the rocky terrain. Alex squinted, trying to make out what it was. It was hard to tell at first, but then she saw it, something enormous, unlike anything she had seen before. It had the shape of a giant creature, but its features were unlike any known species. "Is that a creature?" Alex asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jikar nodded, his eyes wide with surprise. "Yes, but not one I've ever seen before. That's not a native species of Zoreth. It looks different." Alex felt a shiver run down her spine. The creature was towering, with thick, armored plates covering its body. Its movements were slow but deliberate, and it seemed to be heading toward them. Its eyes were dark, and there was an eerie intelligence behind them. "It's coming this way," Jikar said, his voice tense. "We need to hide." But Alex was already moving forward. Something about the creature drew her in, a curiosity that she couldn't ignore. She didn't know what it was, but she had to find out. "No," she said firmly. "I'm not hiding. I need to see this thing for myself." Jikar hesitated but then sighed. "You're stubborn. I'll give you that. Fine. But be careful. This is no ordinary creature." Alex didn't respond. She continued to move toward the giant figure, her feet crunching against the rocky ground. As she got closer, she could make out more details of the creature. Its body was covered in scales, shimmering under the dim light. It had massive claws and a long, coiled tail that swayed behind it. Its size was overwhelming, and Alex had to keep reminding herself that it wasn't hostile, at least not yet. The creature stopped as Alex approached, its dark eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, the two just stared at each other, a strange connection forming between them. Alex felt a sense of awe, mixed with caution. This creature was ancient, a relic of Zoreth's past, and it was far more intelligent than she had first thought. Then, something surprising happened. The creature slowly lowered its head, almost as if it was acknowledging her presence. Alex stood still, unsure of what to do next. Was it friendly? Was it dangerous? She wasn't sure, but she knew she wasn't going to back down now. She took a step forward, her hand outstretched, as if she were offering it a greeting. The creature's eyes seemed to narrow, but it didn't move. Instead, it made a low, rumbling sound that echoed through the cave. Jikar appeared behind her, looking worried. Alex, don't. But it was too late. The creature took a step closer, its massive footfall shaking the ground beneath them. Alex didn't flinch. She had made her choice. She was no longer just surviving. She was learning, evolving. adapting to this planet's challenges. To her surprise, the creature stopped just in front of her, its massive form towering over her. Alex stood still, meeting its gaze, waiting to see what would happen next. And then, the unexpected happened. The creature spoke. Its voice wasn't like anything Alex had heard before. It was deep, resonant, and somehow ancient. It wasn't a language she understood, but the tone was clear. This was a warning. Jikar stepped forward now, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You understand it." Alex blinked, the words she had heard echoing in her mind. It wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. The creature wanted her to follow it. "Jikar," she said softly, her voice full of wonder, "I think this is the big surprise."